friends and extended family. Um, I have too much to talk about, so I'll try and narrow it down a little bit. Um, the I've had a few setbacks in my mycology project. I ran into some contamination, so I've had to, back it up a little bit and rethink the process and look at my cleanliness of my operation. And when you're dealing with microscopic spores and things like that, it's tough. You're dealing with invisible things, so you have to really pay attention to the process itself. So it's a good exercise for someone with ADD and staying on top of it and organized. And I'm trying to get it out on paper. Um, as far as chatting with you, that's going well as well. I'm getting to know you guys better, and hopefully that leads to everyone getting to know one another better. I had some awesome ideas for topics sent to me, so that was really nice. Thank you, Michelle. And I've gotten to talk to a few more of you as well. So that's really good, and every conversation seems to provide me more insight into adoption, and the system itself and how it's operating. Um, one of my fans or subscribers has mentioned that in dealing with the system itself requires a different self, right? Almost, and that oftentimes what you're going to the system for assistance with or help with um, oftentimes exacerbates the problem, which I've come to see. Um, but at the same time, if the problem is sincere and legitimate, and you're insistent that you want to try to solve that problem for yourself, um, and you don't necessarily want to just take the easy solution offered, which is often drugs, um, then there's going to be some work involved and some growth, and that's where I've found myself. That I'm in the work, I'm in the growth. So, um, I also wanted to thank one of my other members who is sending me some more books on the topic of magic, the Golden Dawn, that sort of thing. So I do want to study in that area, and hopefully through that process and that growth, share with you. So I guess that's sort of what my channel has come to. So in talking with Michelle, who had some really good ideas about topics and things, she had mentioned adoption and the hero's journey. Now, I don't want to call myself a hero, but at the same time, I have to, when looking, and doing my own work and seeing my childhood, um, when you're working with that situation, there's a certain amount of needing to be rescued. That inner child needs to be rescued, and I need to become that hero to save that child, so to speak. So I need to grow up, and I need to develop the skills to be able to help myself and become my own heroine and hero in a way. So for the adoptee, I think that that's very relevant. So I'm going to speak to that because there's been also some people who have they've kind of suggested they don't know my story, right? And I with my ADD mind and the way I do my videos, which is very all over the place and mix and match, and um, you really have to watch them all, and then wonder to yourself, do you have all the information? And honestly, I don't know if I've given you all the information. So I think what I'll try and do is cover a few things at once and try to explain, where this scenario, how it started, where I've come from, where I've been, and maybe try to highlight some of the better points. Because I think if my childhood had been all horrible, or my life all horrible, that certainly I wouldn't be here trying to better myself and help others, etc. I think that it could have gone the other way, and perhaps I might have ended up um, becoming a sociopath or a psychopath and just shutting feelings off completely. And I certainly can empathize and sympathize with some of our brethren who have fallen to become murderers, you know, criminals of a very negative variety, violent, etc. And sadly, I can't help but have my heart go out to those adoptees as well, because I can only imagine the hell that they had to go through on their own before finally lashing out in a way that may keep them behind bars or have them killed or etc. Right? So um, when I look at adoptees, I see that they're all part of my group, my family, and it's important that I don't separate myself, that I would never be like that. Because things have gotten to points where I have felt murderous rage. And if you haven't felt murderous rage as an adoptee over some of the things that don't make any sense, well, then maybe you aren't being fully honest with yourself. Because certainly, you can, a lot of people can accept that the world is not fair, but uh, for adoptees on the unlucky side of the spectrum, who have had their fair share plus of misfortune, it can be well less than fair for them. And I've certainly gotten a enough of a dose to see that I don't care for it, and I don't like it, and I know for a fact that there's people who've had it worse, and there always is, and there always will be, and that's not really, we're kind of tricked into competing with one another. Well, and then the TV comes along and throws up, starving Ethiopians. Oh well, no one can complain now because, well, starving Ethiopians, right? Um, and that's a very very clever trick. But I mean, if you can't stand up and say this isn't right for me, and put your foot down, well, then the abuse of yourself and others is just going to keep going on and on and on. And I think that's where we're getting to here, and where I'm getting to is that I'm getting to a point where, as what's been done has been done. So, who do we hold account for the things that have been done wrongly? And that starts becoming tricky. You have to start sorting things out for yourself. Well, I personally have gotten to the point where I can't blame the adoptive parents, and I don't. I cannot blame the birth parents. I don't. I find it hard to blame the social workers. They had quotas to meet, and they had jobs, and they're put in those positions for specific reasons, because they're not critical thinkers. I think is how they get in there. So it's hard to blame them as well. And there's always the the possibility that one of these was just someone who enjoys hurting people, and that's possible and probable in some scenarios. But in the same breath, I'm not going to blame them either. The doctors, should we blame them? Well, I mean, there's 9 years of school these guys put in. And I don't know if some of them just show up and get their diploma and don't need to put in the work, because I think a lot of the work that um, these doctors are doing is not. I mean, it's pointless. I mean, you're memorizing a bunch of stuff you're going to forget anyways. I would think for a lot of that. Um, I'm not blessed with a connection, a conscious connection to my photographic subconscious memory. Some people may have access, can just dig it out at will, and have very long memories for facts and figures and things like that. That's not me. Um, as far as facts and figures go, they belong in a textbook uh, to be easily referenced. I believe it was Einstein or Edison or someone who put it that way. Why bother memorizing something you can reference extremely easily? I mean, someone could memorize an entire phone book, I'm sure, but I mean, if you just pick up the phone book and look up the number, what's the point? Again, though, I mean, there's being able to memorize some phone numbers was good for our memories, I think, and nowadays everything's easily referenceable by our cell phone. I digress, because I don't know, what was I talking about. So anyways, the hero's journey. Well, let's get at it. So I was adopted in Canada, in Western Canada, Alberta, Prairie Province. Um, I was the product of a Ukrainian-Romanian teenage fling. I believe I was conceived on LSD. Explain some things. I do love my hallucinogens. Um, my birth parents were uh, 17 and 19, respectively, mother and father. Grade 11 and 12 educated. Um, Came from middle class backgrounds, and my story was basically part of a large portion of adoption at the time, which was basically social workers going out saying, you're a single mother, you'd be a selfless person to give up your child for a better life, that with people that already have an education or married, blah 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 blah. That the adoptees here should know this story by now, which is, as far as I'm concerned, bullshit. I mean, if anyone looks back at their 12-year education of indoctrination, I mean, it's not worth a spit, and certainly not worth more than your child or a family member by any means of the imagination. Anyways, this is the adoption, and the part of it that I am very anti-adoption. Okay, so if adoption was actually happening for the reasonings that they purport, which I believe more to be like a 1% situation, where the child's being beaten and abused daily, and horrible situations, malnutrition, no money, etc., etc., etc. If that was the real reason, sexually abused, blah blah blah. If that's the real reason that you were removing a child from a home and putting it up for adoption, then that would be acceptable. But that's not it, by a long shot. So let's cut the crap. So anyways, I'm going to try and stay focused, and you can see how hard that is sometimes. But uh, so I'm then adopted out. There's a 3-month gap in my where I was. I don't know who I was with, some foster people, I suppose, and I don't really know what happened there or if anything happened. Um, but I appear on the stage with two people of slightly older, so they were about 25 years old, 24, 25, grade 9 and 10 educations, and smokers, drinkers, not practicing of any religion, um, not atheist at best, um, secular types, very cowed, believes everything they're told on the television and by any authority figure, including anyone that's gone to finished high school is more authoritarian than them. This is where I really got to see how education affects someone's station in life here in Western culture. So and very ready to dish out their own authority over me, right? So there was an element of narcissism involved in this situation, where these people didn't have much control over their own lives. They didn't have a say in anything. And as far as things went, I think the only opportunity that they really saw as being in charge was having a child to be in charge of. When it came to their friends, they didn't seem to be high on the totem pole. When it came to their family, they were low on the totem pole. So ultimately, they were never masters of their own destiny. And if you ask them today, what was the purpose of your life? What were you trying to accomplish? What did you accomplish? What did you learn, etc., etc., etc.? They would not know. They would not have really any answers. They would fall back on old cliches, I think, about their kids being this and that, but nothing was true. Nothing was true. And for a psychologist to go through this, I mean, I think it would be some hard things to take in there. Now, so let's get back to the statistics of things. So as a baby, I was healthy, but I had an undescended testicle. I spent a lot of time in the hospital with lung failure. They diagnosed me with asthma. Turns out I was actually allergic to the cigarette smoke of the two people. And so I just kept going back to the hospital, right? And they just kept giving me oxygen and Ventolin to counteract my lungs not operating in the smoky environment. Anyways, I want to try and fast forward through it statistically if we could, and so yeah, how do we fast forward through it? So yeah, it's difficult. Um, I don't know. It's yeah, I grew up in the suburbs. Um, and I like to catch frogs and spend time in the little forests around my home. And you grow up not really knowing anything, and you're trying to figure things out as you go. And nothing really seemed quite right to me, and nothing seemed at home or familiar. So I was always looking for something unknown, always looking for that missing something. And I used to come across things that sometimes I thought were the thing I was missing, because it provided me some sort of something new. So I think first of all, it started with sexuality, at a very young age, finding that and thought that was the thing I was missing, right? Um, picking up on things, children pick up on things. So if you want out of a situation, I mean, I tried to run away when I was 5. I made it across the street in the middle of Alberta winter, which was, 2 feet of snow, with my little blue blankie and laid down across the street. But I wanted out of there. So at that point, you realize, well, where are you going to go? Especially in Alberta winter, not very far. And the adoptive parents thought that was quite humorous, and I think they chuckled while I was very serious about wanting to run away and leave, and I didn't want to be treated like a slave. I used to say that all the time as a kid, slave. Anyways, I wanted out of there. So what does that mean? You want out. So how are you going to get out if you can't just walk away? Well, to get your own place, you're going to need a wife and a husband, right? So what was I trying to do? I was trying to get a wife. And how do you get a wife? Well, sexuality. I discovered that key, right? So it was always this play of trying to, find a girlfriend, find a wife, move in that direction. And you can look at the behavior. I can look back on my own behavior and see that everything was about trying to grow up, right? So anything I wasn't allowed to do because I was too young, I wanted to do. So I'd be, trying to puff on my dad's tobacco pipe and cigarettes, and getting into the alcohol at the parents' Christmas parties to show that I can do what the adults can do. And hopefully move out and get out of this scenario and get out on my own. And that's been it. I've been trying to find my place, myself, my entire life. And, when I finally do get into those scenarios, whereas those scenarios where I'm living or was living like these adoptive parents were, I didn't have what I was looking for yet. And, it took a lot of going around that merry-go-round and chasing that carrot to finally maybe come to an ultimate realization that this isn't for me. That my life had been maneuvered in such a way in that how do I find my way back to my place? Maybe I was meant to be raised by a single mother and, in rough scenarios. Maybe I was meant to grow up and be a little bastard criminal or something like that. Maybe that was what was meant for me. Maybe that's where I would have been perfectly at peace and at home and enjoyed my life and lived fast, die young. Who knows, right? Who knows? But there's certainly a lot of those people out there. They seem to be going about their business and doing their things, and but at the end of the day, you get this interference in your life, and you're not sure how to get back to a place that never was for you, right? That was taken away, and maybe there is no way back. And I've certainly tried enough lifestyles. I've tried enough different scenarios to really be able to say that I didn't necessarily fit in any of them. So, I guess that was sort of the evolution of how this video thing came to be, in that I have a massive list of my failures in trying to find where I belong, and only to find that I don't. And now I've reached out into the unknown, the great unknown, and told my stories about my failures, to find that there's a whole group of people maybe running into some of these same failures. And being able to share these things, I think, is important, because they're big. They're big. Um, So being able to benefit from people with similar drives and similar experiences, trying things out and failing, painfully sometimes, um, could be a benefit to me, and hopefully my painful failures are a benefit to some of you. And I guess that's at the end here where I am, at the end of this you know trying journey. I find that that is my value, in that I've experienced a lot of different scenarios, and I guess as an adoptee, yeah, I ended up kind of maybe at the bottom of the pile a little bit. Um, you know, so so how does that translate into the hero's journey? Well, I'm in the journey, and I'm trying to find my way, and I guess I think what it is that I found my way out of the toxicity. I found that the alcohol, the drugs, the cigarettes, none of those things help. The vape helped get off the cigarettes, but it's on its way out too. So at this point, there's no nicotine. So I know it's just an exercise in sucking on the nipple. It's even shaped like a nipple. So, anyways, back to my life story. Yeah, it's complex. It's big. It's hard to put together into words. Um, so maybe we need to break it down a little bit. And maybe I should do that in a series of in how to put this together and stay on track. But I get that is a difficulty I run into in trying to tell my life story, in that it's there's the outline, and it's very easy to get sucked into the pain, and it's very easy to get sucked into the events that took place. And there's a lot of characters in that story, and there's a lot of highs and there's a lot of lows, and I will try to work on it more, but I do have the developmental portions laid out, like, you know, play school when I was 4, getting fed peanut butter, nearly dying, and asking for a drink, and the teacher saying, "No, keep eating your sandwich." "Teacher, it's hurting my throat." "Eat your sandwich." So that's just an example of adults not listening to children when they should be very carefully listening to children. I don't know how my childhood was full of what I think would be lawsuits in this day and age. For anyone else would be suing the shit out of the system. Uh, but I think I was one of the first in the area to have an allergy to peanuts. You know, but yeah, when I was laying on the floor turning blue, then the teacher, "Oh, yeah, well, that's you can't just listen to children. You can't just listen to what they're telling you and think. It's always the adult knows best." And that has been proven time and time again false to me. Sadly, as a child, I seem to have more insight into my own operations than adults ever did. And still to this day, I seem to have insight into how I operate, and I try to tell the system, it doesn't listen and destroys me all the time. But anyway, yeah, I just kind of get lost in unresolved childhood issues. When I go back there, I just see these adults that need to get their faces smashed in. And I know that sounds terrible, but I look back on these idiots that, as long as I go back as me as the child, it's like, well, there's nothing I can do. These huge adults are making these decisions for me. When I go back in my memory as an adult with these people, every one of them gets killed because I go back as the protector for the childhood me, and not one of these adults deserves to go on breathing just with their horrid, horrid mis horrid ignorance and narcissism, I guess. I don't know. But certainly big adult Todd going back to defend little child Todd doesn't work out well for these people. Anyways, I guess maybe that's where I'm stuck. I think that is ultimately where I don't know the proper resolution there. So there you go. There's where I'm stuck. If any of you have, some comments on that, or you have your own stickiness, I mean, all I can do is gather up the statements. Well, they shouldn't have been able to do that. They can't do that to you. Blah blah blah. Well, they do. They have. They will. They. It is what it is. Wow, that's a long video. But again, big shout out. I was watching the Celtic Counseling ladies. Complex post-traumatic stress and adoptees, and she really went through it there and broke it down, and I hadn't caught that video before, and I found it very helpful and useful, because that's what we're talking about. What I'm talking about now is the complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because how do you go back into these scenarios where common sense is being thrown away? And even the child has enough common sense to see this stuff is not right at all. And have these adults go on. Just keep going on, pretending like it's okay. It's not. So, sorry, I fell short on this video, but I will pick it up and try to continue on with it soon. And, yeah, love you guys. Thanks.